Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight we have a stark reminder of what happens behind closed doors. Despite violent crimes on the decline in Prince George's County, domestic violence incidents continue to go in the wrong direction. This evening we're hearing from key voices in the fight against domestic violence. We're talking about what's behind this alarming trend, what resources are available for victims, as well as the critical steps that can be taken as a community tries to address this crisis. My guests are Prince George's County Sheriff John Carr, Ivy Finkenstadt, the Managing Attorney for Community Legal Services, Jessica Garth, Chief of the Special Victims Unit for Prince George's County's State's Attorney's Office, and Lisa Hall Johnson, the Administrative Judge for Prince George's County's District Court. Thank you all for joining this conversation. It's really important. I want to get right to talking about the scope of this, and I'll start with you, Sheriff. How significant is the rise in domestic violence incidents in the county? Are we seeing a double-digit increase? What do you also believe is behind it?
So we are seeing an increase, but that increase has basically been steady ever since COVID-19. We still are close to around 2,000 peace and protective orders issued here in Prince George's County. We're also noticing that a lot of it may not be intimate partners, but a lot of it is dealing with family violence that we see in the homes. And we can contribute some of that to basically some of the social issues that we see. Mental health is on the rise. We also see a lot of financial strain on a lot of our families here in the county. So as we monitor and we look at this, we're trying to figure out exactly what resources we need to provide to our citizens to make sure we provide wraparound services, because a lot of these social issues are turning into domestic violence.
Mm-hmm. ASA Garth, same question for you. In your office, what are you seeing? And if you could kind of give us the cliff notes of what your responsibilities are in the State's Attorney's Office.
Sure. So I am the chief of the Special Victims Unit. So I supervise the attorneys in the office who handle domestic violence cases, including intimate partner violence and family violence cases that result in homicide. We also do sexual assaults, abuse of children, human trafficking, and child pornography cases. So we're responsible for the prosecution of all of those cases within Prince George's County. And I agree with Sheriff Carr. We are seeing an increase, but it is a trend that's been ongoing since COVID. Certainly when we're talking about domestic violence, whether it's intimate partner violence or family violence, when you have people who, for example, during the quarantine, were in close quarters, any sorts of issues that would lead to violence were just exacerbated by just, the stress of COVID, as well as just, being in the home together for that amount of time. We are also seeing an increased awareness and focus on mental health issues, which is leading to more violence within the family and within relationships. I think also, and it's sort of the silver lining in this situation, is that what we're seeing is that more people are reporting these incidents of violence. So certainly with relationships and with family violence, there was an attitude for a long time that it was, something that could be handled within the home or by families. And we're seeing people more and more reaching out for services, reaching out to law enforcement, to prosecutors to get help when previously they would not have reached out, and it would have just stayed within the home.
Judge Hall Johnson, talk to me about your role. I mean, most people who have any interaction with the justice system, whether it's civil or criminal, they may, if you get a speeding ticket, we know you go before a district judge. Obviously, if you commit a crime or you've been the victim of a crime, a violent crime, you go to trial in circuit court in the state of Maryland. But what is an administrative judge?
Yeah, so as the administrative judge of the Prince George's County District Court, I hear cases like my colleagues, but I'm also responsible for the administrative aspects of the court. So a lot of the outreach to the Sheriff's Department, the State's Attorney's Office, and our nonprofit service providers like Community Legal Services is part of my role. I also do budgets and schedules and all of those administrative things, but I'm a judge. I sit and hear cases as well. I will say that the district court hears all types of cases. So if someone has committed a crime, if it's generally if it's a misdemeanor, it will be tried in the district court. Almost probably 95% of all bond reviews are done in the district court. That first court hearing where you're determining whether you're going to stay in jail or be released into the community. Those are primarily district court hearings, at least initially, that you'll hear. And the district court does the lion's share of the domestic violence protective order cases. So my role is when people have decided they would like to seek help, and they want protection in the form of a court order, they will come to the court, and the district court sees the vast majority of those cases, although circuit court has concurrent jurisdiction on those cases. So we do the civil and we do the criminal as well.
Ms. Finkenstadt, talk to me about your role as it relates to providing services for victims and support for families.
Certainly, Community Legal Services has been providing representation in civil protective orders for about 8 years, since about 2017 or 2018. Our program provides matching with pro bono attorneys. So if people come in and they have a protective order hearing for a final protective order, we can match them with an attorney in community, or one of our attorneys in Community Legal Services can take their case and represent them at their hearing. So that would be a survivor has a final protective order. There is an amount of evidence that has to be presented to the judge to make their case, and we provide them with the legal representation to do that. CLS also has family law attorneys and family other service areas, so we are able to assist people who have other issues. So if you're in a family violence situation and you need a divorce to get out of that, we can also assist with the divorce through placement with a pro bono attorney or through one of our staff attorneys. We have foreclosure, bankruptcy, child support, and child custody. We offer a multitude of legal services on the civil side for survivors as well as the general public.
That's a lot. So if someone,
yes,
obviously you're doing quite a bit. So if somebody, how does somebody come to you? Ms. Finkenstadt, did you hear my question?
I didn't actually. I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. I was saying, no, that's all right. How does someone come to you? How if someone is the victim of domestic violence or has a problem, how do they get to your organization?
How do people get to Community Legal Services? We have multiple avenues for people to get to the website, phone, but we also have a clinic in the courthouse on Mondays and Tuesdays in Upper Marlboro and on Mondays in Hyattsville, where petitioners who are seeking their very first protective order, the temporary protective order, can speak with an attorney on site in court. That is actually the brainchild of Judge Hall Johnson. We always want to credit her with that. And then we also have our family law clinic in the courthouse in Upper Marlboro. It's on the second floor of the courthouse, M2435, and it's a first come, first serve. Any question about family law that a person has, including domestic violence, they can come and get services there. Mm-hmm. Those are primary avenues.
I see. Yeah. Sheriff, you've been talking with us and others, obviously, about this issue since you've been sheriff. And even in that relatively short period of time since you've been the Prince George's County Sheriff, but you've been in law enforcement for a while, how would you say that the landscape regarding domestic violence has changed? What are deputies seeing when they are addressing these issues?
So I think it's really changed from the intimate partners. We were used to that. And what we saw with a lot of the issues that we were seeing were coming from whether mental health or other issues happening in the home. And that's one thing that when you go to a scene, you're trying to make an assessment on who may be the aggressor, what issues or what resources do we need to provide, documenting the information to make sure that those individuals could receive those rapid services. And that takes time. So one thing, since I've actually started working here at the Office of the Sheriff 20 plus years ago to now, domestic violence has now been in the forefront in which you're taking time out. This is not a call where you go to an issue or a call for service, you see an issue, you take the information and you advise a citizen. This is something that you actually need to take your time. You need to stay and assess the situation. You need to try to get as much information as possible. So even some of our paperwork and documentation has even changed to where we actually identify any injuries. We actually identify what are the causes that may have contributed to this, whether it be assault or whether it be for this altercation. And we're documenting all of that information. And then we're passing that on to our special victim advocates. Those special victim advocates are really trying to follow those survivors or victims of domestic violence to, one, go through the court process, two, letting them know their rights. Here in Prince George's County, we have a wonderful facility, which is the Family Justice Center. We work all together with the Prince George's County Police Department, the State's Attorney's Office, the Sheriff's Office, in order to make sure that we're able to touch each and every component of what now is considered domestic violence.
I guess what I'm asking, Sheriff, is, and I'm talking about the boots on the ground issue. I'm talking about when deputies first come upon a situation. The resources, and certainly we will talk more about that, but I'm really talking about how they approach a situation as opposed to when you first, came into the department 20 years ago. The way that these issues are viewed now by law enforcement are considerably different than they were 2 decades ago.
Yes, and that's some of that is because of the volume. The volume of what we're seeing currently right now, for the boots on the ground going to the calls. One, we try to advise our folks that when you go to the call, you want to try to solve it the first time around. You don't want to have to continue to keep coming back. So you want to make sure that you address the issue as far as rather separating parties. The other aspect is that you're starting to see that, again, it's not intimate partners. You're talking about a father or son. You're talking about a mother or daughter. You're also talking about that mental health component in which somebody may be bipolar or may have a going through a mental health crisis, and then it led into domestic violence. This is something that now the deputies and officers, you have to be able to assess that scene. You have to see exactly what resources you can actually give, only because it takes time. This is something that is time consuming. It is something, again, that you have to document. And this is something when I first started law enforcement, you would go there, you would get the facts of the information in case, and then you'll make a determination on, hey, is this person going to the commissioner's office? Are they doing a peaceful protective order? Hey, is anybody who shows visible signs of injury? Am I locking anybody up? Now it's not that case. Now it's a little bit more detailed because that information and where you are in the beginning of that call for service really helps. It really can contribute to solving an issue later on. As we talk about our legal partners, they need that information. They need to know exactly what's going on. They need to know exactly what we see. We also bring in the fact that we have body-worn cameras. So now it's just not the written and verbal. You now are able to actually see what the deputy sees or what the officer sees on scene, and actually they're able to assist and help us make additional determination. We have new laws, strangulation laws. Now is considered a first degree assault, much different compared to what it was before, in which somebody could be strangled and we didn't see the physical injuries. Now you can actually take them to a medical facility and get an examination that determines if they've been strangled. So it's changed tremendously from where we were, many, many years ago.
Interesting. I need to take a break, but I have a lot of questions about just the process of addressing this, not only legally, but also the kind of the evolution of help that an individual or a family may need. And also want to know what goes on in court. So please stay with us. The Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM, channel 141. Don't forget, you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. Stay with us. This conversation continues on Sirius XM in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about addressing domestic violence. My guests are Prince George's County Sheriff John Carr, Ivy Finkenstadt. She is the managing attorney for Community Legal Services, Jessica Garth, chief of the Special Victims Unit for Prince George's County State's Attorney, and Lisa Hall Johnson, administrative judge with the Prince George's County District Court. I do want to talk about some of the legal stuff, and I'll start with you, SAA Garth. Is it difficult to get someone who has been subjected to domestic violence, physical or emotional, to press charges?
So, we know that domestic violence is a cycle. And we know that it takes an average of, 7 times for a victim to leave that cycle in order to get help and to get out of that situation. What I can say is that it's really very, very important to be patient with our victims and with our survivors. And for anybody who's listening, with your loved ones who may be in the situation where they're in the cycle of domestic violence. We encourage everyone to call 911 when you need help. We encourage people to get medical help, if you need it. And we encourage people that if you're thinking that you're ready to press charges, to come and to talk to us. I understand, and all of the attorneys who work for me understand, that there are real human beings behind these crimes, that our victims and survivors are people who have many different, factors at work. You have children, you have a job. This is somebody that you probably love. You may have a home together, all sorts of factors go into making that decision. And we're aware of that. And we work with our community partners, including law enforcement, including CLS and many other partners, to make sure that our victims and survivors can get the services that they need so that you can come forward, you can press charges, you can close that chapter and move on to the next thing, hopefully happily and healthily and whole.
Yeah, but I guess my question, though, is, we're all human beings, okay? And if a woman, for example, comes to you, or you have a case and she is battered and bruised, and I'm not just talking about it as an assistant state's attorney, I'm talking about as a human being, and you see this person, I know for me, I would say, oh my God, you need to press charges. And so I guess my question is, and please be candid, are there times when you say, baby, you need to file some charges up against this person? That's how do you address that? What are those conversations like?
Yeah, I think the important thing that I always try to take into consideration is that when people are in that position, their power has been taken away. Mm-hmm. What I want to do is to give people their power back. So I want to provide the avenues, the services, the way that a person can get justice so that it's their decision. So a woman in the example that you're talking about, I want to tell her that, the law enforcement properly documented the injury, properly documented all of the statements, properly documented any evidence, the scene, etc. And I want to tell her that if she is ready to come forward, that we are going to take that case as far as we can take it, up to and hopefully including a conviction. And I want to tell that person that we have partners who can help her find a new place to live, that can help her find a job, and anything that she might need. So, basically I'm doing everything that I can to give power back to that person.
Go ahead, Sheriff.
I want to jump in as well, and I'll just speak just from the boots on the ground. I know one of the things that we have to be very candid. We have to be upfront in reference to the facts and let them know that, hey, here's what you need to do. Again, the services are here, but you got to be honest, because a lot of times we do run into families and kids who may be present and they see this type of violence. And we want to make sure that they understand that, hey, Not only are, you're living for that child or that loved one, and they're going through the same situation, but you want to make sure that that child is safe. You want to make sure that that individual who may be in the household as well. So we have to be very honest and candid and call it what it is as far as the violence and what we see. And you have to show empathy, respect, but you really have to be factual as far as what has occurred, what is going on. We can't make the determination for you as far as making you go, but we really do need to state the facts and actually let you know that, hey, moving forward, this is something not only can save your life, but save your loved one. Because again, that person just may not be ready. And all we have to be there is just to support them and help them. But we got to tell them the honest truth about how this road starts to lead into something else.
Judge Hall Johnson, once these cases come before you, and I want to use that same kind of example because there is, as you know, a sizable population who've never been in court. They don't know what happens, and particularly as it relates to domestic violence cases, me included. So I'm and I say me included, I'm talking about not as only as an individual, but also as a news person. Okay, short of, unfortunately, a case of murder. I've not seen what happens when domestic violence cases are being adjudicated, when somebody certainly may be in danger, there is a conflict. So I guess the thing that I'm trying to understand is when these cases come to you the first time, let's say a man and a woman, let's say they are not even married, they don't live together, but and of course we know women are very capable of doing these things too, but let's just use this as an example. If a man is accused of assaulting his partner, what is your role? What happens?
Yeah, so that's a great question. The first thing that I would say is we understand and acknowledge that the courts are intimidating, right? You think of court, and as you said, Harold, you said, oh, I think of murder cases, and the courts are open to the public, right? If you are ever curious about what's happening in the court, you can come in and walk into a courtroom and see it. What I will tell people is you don't have to be a lawyer and you don't have to be well-versed in the law. If you believe that you are a victim of a crime or of a domestic violence issue, go call the police, get help, get safe, but you can come to the courts, right? During business hours, you can walk right into the courthouse, go to the clerk's office and say, I'd like protection. And the clerks will identify which order you need to file. They'll give you the paperwork, they will file it for you, and then they will usher you into a courtroom before myself or one of my colleagues, and we'll hear that petition for a protective order. And we will determine whether you're entitled to relief and how broad that relief will be. And if we grant that order, Sheriff Carr's wonderful deputies will take that paperwork and go out and serve that order so that the other person knows it exists. If you believe that a crime has existed, has been committed against you, right? And sometimes the same incident that would give rise to a protective order will also give rise to a criminal charge. So many people file both. Some people file one or the other. And again, people have to make that decision for themselves. You know, just like ASA Garth gave the statistic that it takes many people 7 times to leave. Many people have to understand that the most dangerous time is when you leave, right? So people have to be equipped with the information. They have to be given access to resources. And so when they are in a situation where they've reached out to law enforcement many times will connect them to some of the resources in our community, like the Family Justice Center, some of the nonprofit organizations, some of the other law enforcement officers. But you don't need law enforcement. You can walk right into the commissioner's office. The commissioner's offices are located at the jail. And also at the Hyattsville Courthouse and here in the Upper Marlboro Courthouse. And you can say, I believe a crime was committed against me. And they will give you the paperwork and you will fill out the paperwork and the commissioner can determine whether you've met the standard for that step to go forward. Then it goes to ASA Garth and her colleagues who will review it. They'll do an intake with you and they'll determine whether it goes forward and what happens. But people can seek a criminal charge on their own. They don't need the police to do that in the state of Maryland. or they can seek a civil order, a protective order. Often people refer to it as a stay away order or restraining order. If you use the wrong term, it's okay, right? You'll walk in and you'll say, I need protection, use whatever term, and our clerks and our commissioners are trained in understanding what you may mean and making sure that you get the proper paperwork and get in front of the appropriate judicial officer to get immediate relief.
So when does this come to your courtroom?
So it depends. So if you come after hours, let's say something happens on Sunday night and you go to the commissioner's office on Sunday night, you will get what's called an interim order, an interim protective order that will be in place for about 48 hours. That order will say to you when you need to come back to court. And when you come back, you'll come back before me or one of my colleagues. And so if you come in during business hours, they'll take you right into the courtroom. And in Prince George's County for the district court, on most days of the week, I run 4 courtrooms. I have 16 courtrooms, hearing all different types of cases, but I dedicate 4 courtrooms to civil orders, protective orders, peace orders, extreme risk protective orders, and petitions for emergency evaluation, those mental health evaluations that you've heard a little bit about, the mental health issues. So if you come during the day, you'll fill out the paperwork, and likely within the hour, maybe less than that, depending on how many people are in line in front of you, you'll be brought right before a judge, and that judge will hear that case that morning or afternoon, that day that you walk in.
So that's what I'm trying to get to, the hearing.
Yes.
And is there a point when the alleged perpetrator of domestic violence and the victim are in court at the same time?
Absolutely, right? So the court always has to balance the equities, right? We have to provide immediate relief to someone who may be abused and needs immediate protection. But the other side of it is there's someone who has been accused of a prohibited act, right? And these orders can be very broad. You know, in a matter of 20 minutes, I can take the house, the car, the kids, the dog, and the gun, right? But what happens is that order is for a limited period of time. If you come after hours, just 48 hours. If you come during the week, it's about a 7-day order, give or take. And in that period of time, we call on Sheriff Carr and his colleagues. They will serve that order to that respondent. That respondent will get notice that an order was entered into, what allegations were made against them, what the judge has awarded, and a court date. And that's very important. I tell people the first thing you do when you get something from the court is please read it. Read it. Read it, because it will tell you when you should come to court. And that next hearing, hopefully both parties will be there. And we can't go forward to that final order until Sheriff Carr has at least served the respondent so that they have what we call notice and opportunity to be heard, right? Notice is the service. You've received this document that says this proceeding has started against you, and there's this order, and an opportunity to be heard, which means there's a court date where the court is asking you to come to share your side of the story of what happened.
So I want to try to be really clear with my question, because in this broader conversation, the thing that I think a lot of people are curious about not only is how to help those people who have been victimized, but I think there's also a question of prevention, which is, I guess, that's what I am trying to understand. And this will also kind of dovetail into a question I have for Ms. Finkenstadt, but specifically Judge Hall Johnson. When you have an alleged perpetrator and alleged victim in front of you, let's say it's the first time, and he says, or she says, but let's just say he says, yes, Your Honor, I hit her, I apologize, this has never happened before. ASA Garth just said sometimes it takes 7 times for someone to leave, whether it's leaving a domicile or the relationship. How do you, and let me put meant on the end of your title, make that judgment? Okay, when this person is standing before you, how do you decide whether or not to say, okay, Mr. Jones, I'm going to give you another opportunity? I'm just trying to understand what is the thought process as a judge
Sure. So they're in two different contexts, right? So in a criminal matter, Madam State may have had the opportunity to talk with the
Madam State?
The state's attorney's office. So
Okay.
Jessica Garth and her colleagues, right, may have talked with the defendant and or his attorney and made some sort of arrangement. And they'll bring that to the court and the court may sign off on it. So it may be, we're not going to go forward with prosecuting this case right now, Your Honor. We would like this person to participate in batterer's intervention or some other treatment or therapy. And would Your Honor agree to that, right? And so in a criminal case, that could happen. In a criminal case, it could be, well, the state wants you to plead guilty to because you have hit someone or you've hurt someone, but they're not going to seek the maximum penalty. The state may come up with what they think is the appropriate disposition, and the court has to sign off on that, right? In a protective order case, the civil case, again, I'm making two decisions. I'm deciding whether the person is eligible for relief and there's been an act, right? Whether it is, you're in a dating relationship and someone has been assaulted, right? That's my first determination. Once I make that determination, now I'm determining what is the appropriate order that should be in place to ensure the safety of that petitioner, right? Sometimes it is no contact, don't go to the house, don't go to the job, don't go to the school. Sometimes if there are children involved, you've got to address that. But sometimes it is, no violent contact going forward. Maybe I'll set it in for a status in a couple of months to see how folks are doing. There's resources available, so I may refer them to our Family Justice Center to get access to some resources or family support services so that they can sort of interview folks and then direct them to the type of counseling. Maybe co-parenting counseling is appropriate, maybe batterer's intervention is appropriate. So there is a plethora of things that could happen, but first the court has to determine whether there has been a prohibited act, whether it's a criminal act or a prohibited act on the protective order statute, to determine whether I have the authority to tell somebody to do anything at all, right? My authority, the court's authority, stems from there has to have been some at least acknowledgement or finding of some wrongdoing, right? If there hasn't been that, I don't have the authority to do much after that.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Finkenstadt, to that point, and I'm probably going to ask you the most difficult question of this conversation, and have you kind of look into, the crystal ball of helping people.
Mm-hmm.
This is, again, a prevention question, and I'm sure you've, based on the laundry list of services that your organization offers, I guess my question is, what is the difference between, in a domestic violence situation, what is the difference between a person who is on the receiving end of an unpleasant word, and we'll use the case of a man, and he decides to hit his partner, as opposed to someone who is on the receiving end of an unpleasant word and he decides to leave the room or the house and cool off?
So with respect to our program, we work with the civil side of the protective order program. And I keep coming back to the court process because we're lawyers, most of us on this call. And we would look at that and we would say to our client who has come for assistance with the protective order, do you have enough evidence here to show what Judge Hall Johnson said, that you are a person eligible for relief in that an act of violence occurred? That being said, we can go into court and we can help that person and be their attorney for their hearing, and the judge can make the determination either way. But what's the difference between somebody who turns away and decides not to have the violent interaction and the person who does? That's sort of the intangible, societal, historical, cultural problem that we're all trying to deal with. And one of the other advocacy avenues that all of the members of this conversation are part of is something called the Domestic Violence Coordinating Council, which is also through the district court. And we work together to put on programming for the community that actually does address some of those underlying prevention aspects. So We'll be putting together something for youth this fall. We are working on our resources. We promote things like the Purple Light Nights from the Sheriff's Office and various jurisdictions to get people out for awareness of how they can prevent violence in their homes, how they can prevent violence in their communities. So as far as what goes on in individual people's relationships and homes, we're here for some of that guidance and after the incident, but also to provide some of those steps to get away from that long term. So something like a divorce or a custody matter and things that may happen as a result of having to leave, like needing to have a confidential address or needing to break your lease and things of that nature.
Yeah, and Sheriff, kind of piggybacking on that, and I should say Sheriff / social worker, because and that's, and I say that tongue in cheek, but you know better than I that is the reality. And you mentioned earlier in this conversation, you were talking about you're seeing a rise in this issue with youth. What specifically are you seeing? Because I guess the complex, to oversimplify the conversation or the question that I asked Ms. Finkenstadt is, why would you do that?
So the biggest thing, and you had a wonderful question in reference to that. You have to look at, especially when we talk about our youth, what they believe is a healthy relationship. When you actually share your location with your significant other at a young age, and they want to know exactly where you're going. When that significant other is taking your phone and want to see who you're texting or who you're talking to, or why are you hanging out, or why are you talking to an individual. A healthy relationship, or our younger folks believing that it's okay for him or her to hit me when they get upset, because that's how they show that they love me, and that's how they show that they care. They're looking from the parent's perspective. They're also looking at social media. They're also looking at what they see on real TV and all of these shows that may show the baddies and they're fighting each other. And this is how we actually deal with some sort of discord, or this is how we deal with our issues. This all comes out in our youth. So when you want to talk about a positive, healthy relationship, where are they going to get that from? And I know you have all of us here on this call, and all of us are actually dealing with snapshots of individuals' lives. So there's an incident that occurred. You are now involved with somebody here on this call, and we're trying to assist and help you. But you've been dealing with this individual for years, months, weeks. It could be anything. That snapshot of what we're dealing with right now does not dictate or does not say exactly how you're going to proceed or move forward. When you grew up with this individual, you were high school sweethearts, and it became domestic violence later on. For somebody on this call to tell you that, hey, you need resources, you need to leave, that doesn't mean that they're going to do so. They need that assistance, and that they need to be reassured that, hey, we're here for you when you are ready. Here's what you can do. And we need to make sure that we're consistent with those individuals. And even after they go to court and they deal with all of us, that trauma is still going to be there, especially if you have kids. Because that child is going to want to know what happened between my mother or my father. That child is want to know why, my mom feels this way about my dad, or why can't I see my dad? This doesn't actually deal with all the times the child support and the custody issues. This is something temporary, and when you look at the protective order standpoint, but then you have the child custody issues. You have who's going to be paying child support, who's going to be having custody. So when we look at these healthy relationships, we have to look at, one, the family structure. Two, we have to then provide exactly, hey, what additional resources can we do? So we're going younger. We're not just in middle schools now. We're dealing with elementary school kids, because they're starting to see some of these issues and problems. They're starting to see, hey, when daddy drops me off, he talks bad about mommy, or when mommy drops me off, he's saying nothing good about daddy and what daddy may be. This is something that we see on a day-to-day basis. When parents start to tell a child or about, your father isn't good, your mother isn't this, that plays a huge role in how that child is going to affect their relationships when they get older. So we want to talk about positive relationships and help them out.
Judge Hall Johnson, you were nodding your head when the sheriff was speaking. Your thoughts about what he was saying?
Our sheriff is preaching a word to the people today. What we see is children that have grown up in chaos and dysfunction. And then when they become young adults, they don't know how to regulate emotion. They don't know, just because I'm mad at you doesn't mean I need to hit you or talk bad about you, right? They emulate what they see. They emulate what they are watching on TV. They emulate what the environments that they've grown up in. And so many times when people come to the court and they're talking about these incidents that are occurring, often it's very clear to the court through the testimony that there are children observing this behavior, right? There are children in the room when people are engaging in physical altercations and all of these things are happening. And I often wonder to myself, outside of the sheer trauma, like how does that child understand what has happened, and how does that dictate how that child will deal with people in the future? We have to be very, very aware of how our conduct impacts those around us, those in our families, and particularly our young children, because they emulate what they see.
ASA Garth, are you seeing that same kind of issue with children in your office?
Yes, I mean, I think if you were to look back at the people who are appearing as defendants in our court system today, you would probably find that they were at one time the child in the room who was seeing their own parents being abused. And certainly, we try to address it on the back end. We have enhanced penalties, for example, for crimes of violence that are committed in the home in front of children, just as an extra, disincentive and an extra penalty on people who do commit crimes like that. But it's certainly an issue. And it is leading to an increase, I think, in family violence. And I think what we're all kind of talking about here, we address a lot. We do everything we can to give services and to get justice for our victims and for our survivors. But I think what's equally important, and maybe even more important, is to address the issues that are with the person committing the abuse. Because at the end of the day, it's the choice of that person for him or her to lift his hand against another person. That person is making that choice. And yes, it's influenced by how you're brought up. It's influenced by what you're taught. It's influenced by what you see, but it is your own personal decision to commit that abuse. I mean, I know Judge Hall Johnson talked about the Batter's Intervention Program, for example, and that's something that we rely on a lot at the prosecutor's office. But at the end of the day, we can force somebody to attend a program, to attend 26 sessions, but I can't force somebody to take away what they need to take away from that program, or to put into that program what they need to put in. So I think that we also as a community need to be focusing on educating people who might be in the position to commit these crimes in the future, and provide those kinds of services as well.
Unfortunately, I'm going to have that be the last word. Certainly we could talk about this for hours and hours on end, but I think at least we were able to not only provide some information, some helpful information from everyone's perspective, but also to give something, some of our listeners, something to think about, whether they believe that there is a possibility that they may be unsafe, or someone else that they know may be unsafe. So I want to thank all of you for taking the time to talk to me today, and hopefully we will definitely be able to help somebody stay out of these kinds of situations. That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, June 24th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.